The low hum of first class was shattered by a sharp, nasal voice. You need to move. That's our seat. Two women, dripping with entitlement, loomed over an elderly passenger. Their target, my mother. The tension was instant. A crackle in the air. This was more than a seat dispute, it was a public shaming. And they had no idea who they were really challenging. Two women stood in the aisle blocking the passage with their expensive handbags and overflowing entitlement. The first broad-shouldered, dressed in a hot pink velour tracksuit, had blonde hair piled high and sunglasses perched like a crown on her head. Her manicured hand jabbed toward the window seat. The second woman, slightly shorter but equally heavy-set, wore a fitted purple outfit with layered necklaces that clinked when she moved. Both looked furious. The target of their outrage was an elderly woman sitting by the window, a neatly folded cardigan draped across her shoulders. Her name was Susan. Her silver hair framed a face lined by decades of kindness, not conflict. She blinked up at them in confusion, clutching her boarding pass as though it might shield her from the storm gathering above her head. I beg your pardon, she said softly. The woman in pink, Nora, snatched the paper from her hand without asking. Don't play dumb. These are our seats. 2A and 2B. You're in them. Her sister Arya leaned over the aisle, her perfume sickly sweet. People try this all the time, sneaking into first class, hoping no one will notice. She smirked pathetic. Susan's lips parted in disbelief. The murmurs of other passengers rippled like whispers through the air. Across the aisle, a businessman frowned over his laptop. A young couple exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone could feel it. That awful escalating moment when decency buckled under arrogance. Every word was a needle in my skin. I froze, my hand still inside the overhead bin. That was my mother. The woman who taught me that grace is a choice you make, even when you have every right to be rude. And these strangers were tearing that grace apart in front of a cabin full of people. My name is Ryan, 34, marketing consultant, frequent traveler, and, more importantly, Susan's son. I'd surprised her with this trip, a first-class ticket to London, her first flight in 10 years. Excuse me, I said evenly, stepping forward. Those are our seats. Maybe check your tickets again. Nora turned toward me slowly, her expression dripping with disdain. Oh, of course. The son. Let me guess, you upgraded her. A few passengers stifled gasps. I clenched my jaw but kept my tone calm. Ma'am, these tickets are printed with our names. Please look closely before accusing anyone. Arya rolled her eyes. You can't buy class, and you clearly can't afford it either. Before I could reply, a flight attendant approached, drawn by the disturbance. She was young, professional, her blonde hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her name tag read Clara. She stopped beside us, her posture diplomatic but firm. What seems to be the issue here? She asked, her voice calm. Nora wasted no time playing victim. This old woman is in our seats, and now her son's getting aggressive. We paid for 2A and 2B, and we're not leaving until someone fixes this. Clara turned to Susan. Ma'am, may I see your boarding passes, please? Susan handed them over quietly, her eyes flickering toward me with an apology she didn't know. Clara compared both sets of tickets, scrolling through her device with practiced precision. The seconds stretched painfully. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Clara looked up. Ladies, your seats are actually 12C and 12D in economy. The silence shattered into disbelief. What? Nora barked. That can't be right. There must be a mistake. Arya added, folding her arms. We always fly first class. Clara's polite smile didn't waver. The system doesn't make mistakes with seat assignments. These two seats belong to Mrs. Susan Cooper and Mr. Ryan Cooper. Nora laughed sharp and cruel. Oh, please. Some glitch in your fancy computer system. That's all. I'm not sitting back there with the rest of the cattle. Clara's voice cooled. Ma'am, please lower your voice. You're disrupting the cabin. But the Karen sisters didn't back down. Arya crossed her arms. You should upgrade us. We're platinum members. I could see passengers pulling out their phones now, pretending not to record. The scene had turned from uncomfortable to spectacle. My mother sat silently, eyes downcast, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Ryan, she whispered. Maybe I should just move. I don't want trouble. Her voice broke something inside me. No, Mom, I said. You're not moving. You have every right to be here. Nora scoffed. Wow. Raising your voice to your mother in front of everyone. Real classy. Arya smirked. He's just embarrassed we caught them lying. I looked at them both, my patience thinning to a wire. You're embarrassing yourselves, I said quietly. Not her. Clara interjected again, trying to de-escalate. Please, everyone, remain calm. I'll double-check the manifest, but until then, Mrs. Cooper will remain seated. Nora huffed, flopping dramatically into the empty seat across the aisle. Fine, but when you see we're right, I expect an apology. Arya hovered nearby, glaring at my mother with open hostility. Some people just think they can buy respect, she muttered under her breath. I heard it. So did Clara. But Susan, she simply sat upright, eyes fixed on the window, her dignity untouched even as they tried to chip away at it. Clara walked briskly toward the front, tablet in hand. As she disappeared behind the curtain, Nora leaned closer to Arya. Honestly, the nerve of some people probably used reward points or something. Probably. Arya sneered. You can always tell. Every cruel word echoed in my head. The cabin's hum seemed louder now, the tension electric. I wanted to say something to shout to make them understand who they were dealing with. But Mom's quiet composure stopped me. Let them talk, she said softly. The truth doesn't need to shout. Her words were steady, but I saw her hands trembling slightly in her lap. I felt the sting of helpless anger crawl under my skin. The scene had turned humiliating. People whispered behind their hands, eyes darting between the sisters and my mom. 5 minutes stretched into 10. The plane hadn't pushed back yet. Everyone was waiting for the verdict. Nora tapped her nails against the armrest impatiently. Arya kept sighing theatrically. The cabin's luxury now felt suffocating, the air thick with judgment and self-righteousness. Finally, the curtain parted. Clara returned, her expression unreadable. She stopped by our row, holding her tablet firmly in both hands. Before she could speak, Nora jumped up. Well, did you fix it? Tell them to move. Clara took a slow breath. Ladies, she said evenly. I've confirmed everything. Your tickets are for seats 12C and 12D. The system, the manifest, and the boarding skin all match. The color drained from Nora's face, replaced instantly by anger. That's ridiculous. Someone must have switched it. Clara didn't flinch. No one switched anything. You're welcome to take your assigned seats, so we can depart on time. Passengers began to whisper louder now. Some smiling, some shaking their heads. Nora glanced around, realizing she was losing her audience. This isn't over, she hissed. I want to speak to the captain. Clara gave a polite nod. Of course, I'll inform him immediately. And as the flight attendant disappeared once more behind the curtain, the thought flickered through my mind like static. They had just demanded the wrong woman's seat. The seconds felt longer than minutes. Every click of the attendant's shoes down the aisle thudded against the tension building inside the cabin.
Nora sat stiffly with her arms crossed, her hot pink sleeve brushing the armrest like a challenge. Arya was leaning halfway into the aisle, whispering something harsh, her voice thick with irritation. The air around them was no longer luxurious. It was charged, humming with anticipation. Passengers stole glances from behind magazines and tablets, pretending not to watch, yet eager for what would happen next. When Clara returned, her expression carried the calm confidence of someone about to deliver a verdict. She stopped beside our row and spoke clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. I've confirmed the seating assignments again with the gate system. She said the tickets for 2A and 2B belonged to Mrs. Susan Cooper and her son, Mr. Ryan Cooper. There it was. The truth, simple, final, impossible to argue. For a brief moment, Nora's face froze, a picture of disbelief. Then her jaw tightened, the corners of her mouth twitching as she tried to regain control. That can't be right, she snapped. Check again. We paid for first class. We always do. Clara's tone was polite but unyielding. "I've checked twice, ma'am. There's no mistake." Arya's voice came out sharp and shrill. "Unbelievable. You expect us to just move to economy like common people?" Several passengers exchanged knowing looks. One even chuckled quietly before pretending to sip their drink. Nora heard it. Her eyes darted around, taking in the silent judgment surrounding her. The pink fabric of her tracksuit seemed almost too bright under the golden light. "Maybe your system lost our upgrade," she said, trying to soften her voice. "We're platinum members." "Then you know airline policy," Clara replied evenly. "Upgrades are confirmed at the gate, not in the air. You're welcome to request it next time." Arya's face flushed red. "Next time, I'm not moving." I could feel my pulse in my throat. Part of me wanted to intervene again, but I also wanted to see where this was going. There was something different about the way Clara spoke now, controlled but edged with quiet authority. She wasn't intimidated by them. "Ladies," she said, her voice steady, "we cannot depart until everyone is in their assigned seats." Nora huffed, tossing her hair. "Then call someone who can fix this. I want the captain." Clara's lips pressed together in a faint smile. "I'll see if he's available." As she turned away, Nora muttered to Arya, "I bet she's just covering for them. Probably knows them." Mom looked out the window, her profile calm against the golden cabin light. I could tell she was thinking, calculating. Then she said softly without turning her head, "Ryan, stay seated. Let her handle this." There was something in her tone, something measured, deliberate, that made me stop questioning. She wasn't nervous anymore. She almost sounded prepared. 5 minutes passed, the curtain parted. But it wasn't Clara alone. The man who stepped out behind her made the entire cabin sit up straighter. It was the captain, his silver hair and impeccable uniform commanding an immediate, silent respect. The captain approached, his voice calm but firm. "Good evening. I understand there's been some confusion about seating." Nora leapt at the opportunity. "Yes, finally. These people are in our seats, and your staff refuses to fix it. We paid for first class." He turned his gaze towards Susan and me. When his eyes landed on her, something changed. His posture straightened. A faint, almost reverent smile touched his face. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, his tone warming instantly. "It's been a long time." The cabin hushed. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade for a moment. Susan looked up at him with a modest smile. "Hello, Captain Raymond. I thought you might not recognize me." "Oh, I'd recognize you anywhere," he replied. "Ladies and gentlemen, this woman sitting here," he said, turning slightly to address the passengers nearby, trained half of the pilots in this airline. She was one of the first flight instructors we ever had.
Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cabin like a gust of wind. The businessman who had been frowning at his laptop now looked at my mother with something like awe. The young couple exchanged a wide-eyed glance, one of them suppressing a triumphant smile. Nora blinked rapidly, confusion chasing anger across her face. Arya's mouth hung open. "Wait," Arya stammered. "You mean she?" "Yes," Captain Raymond said. "She's one of the reasons you're flying safely today." For the first time, Nora's voice faltered. We didn't know." The captain's smile faded, and yet you felt entitled to harass her. His tone sharpened. "That's not how we treat passengers or people on my flight." A smattering of applause broke out from the rows behind us. A businessman in the third row started clapping, followed by others until the sound filled the cabin. Nora's face flushed crimson. Arya looked down at her lap, her purple bangles trembling. The captain turned to Clara. "Escort these ladies to their assigned seats in economy. If they refuse, we'll have them removed before takeoff." The laughter from the back of the cabin was impossible to ignore now. Nora spun toward me, her composure crumbling. "You could have said something earlier," she hissed. "I did," I replied simply. Clara gestured toward the aisle. "This way, please." Nora hesitated, then grabbed her designer purse and stood up stiffly. Her sister followed, muttering something about unprofessionalism and lawsuits, but their words were hollow, stripped the power they once carried. As they made their way down the aisle, passengers leaned aside to watch them go. One man whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Enjoy the legroom in row 12." Laughter rippled again. When they were gone, the atmosphere shifted. It was as though someone had lifted a weight from the room. The golden light seemed softer now. Clara exhaled quietly, relief hidden behind professionalism. "Thank you, Captain," she said. He nodded. "Thank you for handling it with patience." Then he looked at my mother once more. "It's an honor having you aboard, Mrs. Cooper." "The honor's mine," she said, smiling gently. When he walked away, the sound of polite conversation slowly resumed. Champagne glasses clinked again. But under that thin return to normalcy, there was a pulse, a lingering sense of awe of respect. Everyone now looked at my mother differently. I leaned closer to her. "You knew him." "I trained him," she said quietly, "back when pilots still had to calculate fuel loads by hand." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You never tell anyone these things." She looked at me, her expression tender but firm. "I don't need to. The sky remembers." Her words hung between us, gentle yet powerful. Outside the window, dusk settled over the runway. The engines deepened their growl as the plane prepared for departure. In the faint reflection of the window, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. Serene, proud, utterly unshaken. She wasn't just someone's passenger. She was part of the sky itself. A faint rustle drew my attention back toward the aisle. A flight attendant passed, murmuring into her radio. The plane hadn't moved yet. Maybe the captain was filing a report. Maybe the Karen sisters were still arguing at the back. I didn't care. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt something unfamiliar aboard an airplane. Absolute calm. Mom reached over, her hand resting gently on mine. "You don't win against people like that by shouting," she said. "You win by staying steady." I smiled. "You call that steady? You just had the captain himself come out for you." Her lips curved slightly. "I didn't ask him to, but sometimes respect finds its way home." And as we lifted off, I had the strange certain feeling that karma had just boarded the plane with us. The plane had leveled out over the clouds, its engines humming like a distant storm held at bay. The tension from earlier still hung in the air, diluted, but not forgotten. I could feel eyes occasionally drifting toward our row, toward my mother, the quiet woman who'd just turned an entire confrontation into a lesson in dignity. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, serving drinks. Clara approached us with a calm smile that carried a hint of admiration. "Mrs. Cooper, the captain, asked me to bring this to you." She set down a flute of champagne on the tray. The glass shimmered faintly under the soft cabin light. Compliments of the cockpit. Mom looked almost embarrassed. "That's very kind." But Clara leaned in slightly. He insisted. Mom gave a polite nod. "Tell him thank you and that I'm still proud of the pilot he became." Clara's smile deepened. "I'll tell him exactly that." She straightened, gave me a knowing look, and moved on down the aisle. For a moment, all was peaceful. The steady drone of the engines, the rhythmic clink of cutlery, the golden wash of cabin lights. It almost felt normal again. But that calm didn't last. It never does when pride refuses to land. A sharp voice broke through the hum from somewhere behind the curtain, separating first class from economy. "This is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to sit here." It was unmistakably Nora. Even the thick insulation of the divider couldn't soften that shrill tone. A few passengers exchanged looks, sighing quietly. Ariel's voice followed a little lower, but equally angry. "Do you know who we are? We'll sue this airline for humiliation." The words hung in the air like static. Clara appeared from the galley, her professional smile slightly thinner now, and disappeared behind the curtain again. Moments later, the commotion dulled, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Mom didn't react. She simply adjusted the blanket over her lap and sipped her drink. Her composure fascinated me. It wasn't the smug satisfaction of someone who'd won. It was the grace of someone who'd seen this kind of storm before. After a while, she turned to me. "People like that, They're afraid of being unseen. They confuse attention with respect. I nodded. You think they'll ever realize that? She gave a small smile. Maybe someday. Life has a way of teaching what pride refuses to learn. Hours passed. Night crept across the cabin windows and the first-class section dimmed to a soft amber glow. Most passengers had drifted to sleep. I scrolled through the in-flight map absently, watching our little plane icon crawl over the ocean. Then came a chime. The seatbelt sign flickered on. The intercom crackled, and the captain's calm voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some unexpected turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated. The cabin shifted into quiet alertness. Drinks were secured, trays lifted, conversations cut short. Outside, faint flashes of lightning danced across the distant horizon. The turbulence hit moments later. A sudden dip, then a shudder that made a few passengers gasp. Mom gripped the armrest, her knuckles calm and steady. Her eyes stayed on the window, studying the dark clouds below. They should have changed course earlier, she murmured softly. You can tell that? I asked. I can feel it, she said. Air currents don't lie. Another jolt rattled the plane. Somewhere behind us, a startled cry rose. The sound of fear breaking through arrogance. As the plane shook, I realized some turbulence wasn't in the air. It was in the souls of the people being forced to relinquish control. For the first time, they were truly in a situation their bluster couldn't fix. Nora's voice carried even through panic. Why is this happening? The flight attendants moved swiftly, checking belts, soothing passengers. Clara passed by again, moving toward the back. Even in the shaking light, I caught the faintest trace of her gratitude when she glanced at Mom. It was as though somehow her presence alone made people steadier. The turbulence lasted longer than it should have. 10 minutes, then 15. The captain's voice returned, still calm, but with a faint edge of effort. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're adjusting altitude to avoid the worst of the weather. Mom closed her eyes, breathing slowly, counting under a breath, an old pilot's reflex. I could see her lips move with every shift of the engines, every subtle change in the pitch of the airframe. Then, almost as if she were answering some invisible signal, she whispered, "There it is." Moments later, the shaking eased. The plane steadied. The lights flickered once, then brightened. The passengers exhaled as one. When the cabin quieted again, Clara reappeared, kneeling beside our row. She was right, she said in a low voice, glancing at Mom. The captain said, we cleared the turbulence by changing altitude exactly when she predicted. Mom smiled faintly. Old instincts die hard. Clara hesitated before speaking again. The passengers in economy. Those women, they caused a scene during the turbulence, demanding to move back here again. The captain's filing a formal report. Mom sighed softly. Let them learn whatever lesson they're meant to learn. As Clara left, I caught sight of movement through the half-open curtain. Nora and Arya were standing in the aisle again, faces flushed, trying to push past a flight attendant who was blocking them. Their hair was frizzed from the humidity, makeup smudged, nerves frayed. The attendant's patience had evaporated. Their tone was firm. Final. You need to sit down, one said. Now, for the first time, I saw fear flash across Nora's face. Not from the turbulence, but from realizing she no longer controlled the situation. She looked small under the cold overhead light, stripped of her certainty. The captain stepped out once more, his voice calm, but unyielding. Ladies, your behavior has disrupted the cabin and endangered passengers. Upon landing, you will be met by security personnel. A murmur rippled through the passengers. Nora tried to argue, her words tumbling over themselves, but it didn't matter. Her voice carried no power anymore. When the curtain fell shut again, silence filled the space it left behind. Mom adjusted her seat and looked out at the endless black sky, her reflection faint in the glass. Sometimes, she said softly, the storm isn't outside the plane. It's inside people. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Dawn crept slowly through the windows as we approached the city, painting the clouds gold. The intercom chimed again, announcing descent. The air smelled faintly of coffee and cabin pressurization, a scent that always meant closure. When we landed, applause broke out again. Half for the captain's skill, half for the unspoken drama that had unfolded miles above the earth. As passengers disembarked, several stopped to shake my mother's hand, thanking her without fully understanding why. At the gate, two uniformed officers waited near the terminal door. Nora and Arya were escorted toward them, their protest subdued, their pride finally grounded. They looked nothing like the women who had marched down the aisle hours ago. I lingered near the window, watching them disappear into the crowd. Mom came up beside me, her voice quiet. "It's strange," she said. "The higher people climb in their own minds, the harder it hurts when they fall." I followed her toward the exit, still processing everything that had unfolded. She had faced their hostility and the sky's turbulence with the same unshakable calm. I finally understood. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by being the one thing your opponents can never be: steady. And sometimes, the sky itself delivers the justice that people on the ground are too polite to administer.